Welcome to the Fuel Growth Podcast, where we explore how to unlock the secrets to sustained revenue growth. David Roberts is our guest today. He is the Chief Executive Officer of SugarCRM, appointed to that position in September 2024. Prior to joining Sugar, he served as CEO of Alchemer, where he scaled the company into a leader in the customer feedback and survey industry. David has also held senior leadership roles as CEO of Reed Group and as a senior partner at Accenture, bringing over 2 decades of experience in the CRM sector. Throughout his career, he has been recognized for his focus on innovation, operational excellence, and customer success. Welcome to the pod, David.
Thanks, Clint. It's great to be with you.
It's good to have you here.
Yeah, it's a rather unique pleasure to have you on the podcast, David. You are the CEO of SugarCRM, which is the sponsor of the Fuel Growth Podcast. And we haven't interviewed somebody from SugarCRM before. Before we jump into the business side of things, can we get to know you on a personal level? Specifically, can you talk about how you fuel your own personal growth outside of the office?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a constant quest to try to be better at whatever I'm doing. And I love the Colorado mountains. I live here in Colorado. I spend a ton of time outdoors. As an example, I love to ski, but I'm not skiing blue groomers. I'm in the moguls trying to improve my form and get better at moguls when I'm out there skiing. And so the challenge of trying to be better at things is a lot of what fuels me. And it drives me at work, but it also drives me personally. I've got a couple teenage boys, and my wife and I spend a ton of our time on soccer and flag football sidelines, watching them and paying attention to them. The oldest one's about to be able to drive, which might take a little bit of pressure off of the constant currying and Ubering of our children, but they occupy a huge amount of my time, energy, and love too.
Well, enjoy every moment of that while you have it. I'm now an empty nester as of 2 years, and I miss going to all the games and sporting events. That was such a big part of my life, so that's awesome. Hey, let's shift gears and let's talk about your professional background and striving to be better. Tell us a bit about the path that led you to become the CEO of SugarCRM.
Yeah, well, it was a bit of an interesting path. There's a theme throughout a lot of this, which is being really close to the customer and focusing on software and technology that improves customer success and relationships. I started with Anderson Consulting straight out of school. And if I'm completely honest, I was like a lot of 21-year-old young men, didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my life. And consulting sounded nice and open-ended. So I joined Anderson Consulting and that became Accenture. And I was lucky. I ended up part of the CRM practice from really early on and spent the next 17 years helping organizations improve their relationships with their customers. And that took me from consumer packaged goods early on to high tech in California to British government across a huge spectrum of geographies and industries, all with the customer at the core and the customer being what was most important to our clients. I left there, did something completely different and helped the mayor of Denver run the city of Denver, again, trying to help the customer of the city, which is really the resident, get the most out of the city. And then this is now my third CEO role, all along really, again, focused on front office software and technology. First with helping employees access benefits, then to Alchemer, which you mentioned, which was feedback and survey software. And finally now here to Sugar, completing the circle of my CRM path.
Personal and a professional question, but what professional growth for yourself are you looking to accomplish in your third tenure?
Well, I keep trying to do it better, Lizzie. And I think for me as a CEO, you really own strategy, culture, clarity, communication. These are things that I think every CEO is responsible for. And I've learned a lot over the 3 roles. And I think I'm doing some things here at Sugar that have built on what I've done in the past. I want to be able to provide great clarity and consistency in how every employee here at Sugar knows how they connect to our mission and our strategy. Everyone in the company should be able to connect the dots from what they're doing every single day to where we're headed and why that's important. And it takes a while, it takes a lot of repetition, it takes a lot of thoughtfulness about that. But I think that's a part of my leadership that I've gotten better in each role.
How would you describe that as a CEO? Like, do you have a specific type of CEO that when you look in the mirror, you say, that's who I am?
Well, Clint, I often describe myself as a mechanical strategist. And I've heard people use that term. I started using that term probably 15 years ago. And I've heard other people use it since. I love strategy. Really have to understand how the dots connect. into the business and into kind of operations and execution for it to make any real sense to me. So we've got a strategy here at Sugar, and I love to see everyone connect into that, and that there's a lot of alignment, a lot of clarity, and a lot of like connection down into the organization. So everyone can operate somewhat independently and know where we're headed overall. So I don't know if that's who I am as a CEO, but mechanical strategist is something that I've often talked about.
Do you have a role model or another type of CEO or another CEO out there that you admire?
I don't know. I struggle with that. I think I'll give a couple examples. I think when you're developing software and trying to meet a market, it's really important to understand the what, but not necessarily the how. I'm a big fan of listening to customers. Lizzie, I know you have a lot of passion about VOC as well. But I think when you listen to customers, it's listening to them articulate what they're trying to achieve. Often customers will try to tell you exactly how they want to see it show up. And I think if you listen to that too much, you get locked in on ideas. So I love how Apple, and there's been a number of leaders at Apple that have focused on the what, not necessarily the how. They're constantly thinking about the new ways to deliver on the how that maybe the customer wouldn't have been able to articulate themselves. And I think that started with Steve Jobs. I think it's the culture of Apple today. So I love how they develop products that no one would have articulated exactly the way that they built them, but they know what they were trying to do in their lives. I've gotten to know a CEO here in Denver really well, who founded a company called Ping Identity, a guy named Andre Duran. And I have a ton of respect for all the phases of growth that he's led that company through, from startup to angel investment, to venture capital, to private equity, to public, back to private equity again, like being able to keep your rudder in the water and having different partners and investors over time, but having clarity of kind of vision and purpose and being able to weather all those different stages of growth and kind of company maturity has been remarkable to watch.
All right, so let's shift gears. You're the CEO of a CRM company, and there are a lot of CRM companies in the market today. Tell us about SugarCRM and what sets the company apart.
I think we do an amazing job of helping sellers sell better. So I started in CRM 30 years ago, and CRM's always been about this illusion of control that sales leaders have. They think that pipeline management and forecasting is going to allow them to deliver better results. And it can to some degree, but CROs or sales leaders or commercial directors, whatever the title may be, what they actually want is for sellers to be better at what they do, right? The top 20% of sellers are always going to exceed their number. The bottom 20%, no matter what you do, are never going to do what you need them to do. I think the trick in CRM is moving the middle 60 to the right. And I think what Sugar does a great job of, shift that bell curve to the right, help the middle 60 be really good at what they do. And I think it's not through asking salespeople to capture more fields about their opportunity. In fact, I used to joke back at Accenture that teams got a budget of 5 fields beyond the core opportunity information. They got 5 more fields, and that's all they could ask for. Asking sellers to go capture a bunch of data is never going to move the needle. I love that Sugar is able to provide insight into their patch, into their customer base, into their product suite, and use analytics, which we've always used to help sellers find their way to their best next step, to now how we're leveraging AI and being able to use AI to recognize patterns in large data sets and able to summarize information across all sorts of different mediums. Our lead engineer said something the other day that I love. He said that structured data is the data of business and unstructured data is the data of relationships.
Unstructured data is the data of relationships. That's kind of like emails and documents and conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. If you think about whatever relationships you have in your life, you're not communicating to whoever those relationships are with through structured data, right? You're sending them a text, or you're talking to them live, or you're writing them an email, and it's all unstructured.
You know, I could never get my kids to read those spreadsheets I send to them.
Right. I know you love your spreadsheets, Clint, but that's not the language of relationships. It's the language of business, right?
No, it's not.
So I think, again, what Sugar can do is be able to capture that unstructured data, the data of relationships, and help people make sense of it and know what to do next based on it.
I love that. That's a great idea. And in there, I had to ask though, aren't all companies, all CRM companies, trying to apply AI in similar ways? What are you doing that's different?
They are. I think sometimes people talk about AI as a technology looking for a problem to solve.
Yeah.
I remember back when people talked about blockchain. Besides chain of custody, nobody could talk about the specific ways that blockchain was going to help business. It was always a hammer looking for a nail. And I think AI is today's version of that. It's technology looking for a business problem to solve. I think what Sugar's really good at is taking a pragmatic approach. I'd prefer if our sales managers, our sales manager customers, our sales rep customers, they didn't even know it was AI. We were guiding them in the right direction because it was in line with how they run their day-to-day in their business. And I think Sugar's very pragmatic in how it applies AI. And I think it makes it really easy to use and really approachable for businesses and sales teams.
So one of the hot topics in AI right now is this concept of agentic AI. Do you have a point of view on that? Does Sugar have a point of view on that?
Well, yes, that is a hot topic. And one of our competitors talks about it incessantly. I think ultimately in sales, the agent, if we talk about agentic AI, the agent is the seller. And I think people buy from people. I often say that sales is about the transference of belief. And I think people transfer belief.
Ooh, I like that one. Sales is the transference of belief. That's deep. That's a good one.
I hope it's not too deep, but
no, that's good. I like that. That is really profound.
So it's the transference of belief. I'm not sure how agents transfer belief, right? So I think with customer service, there's agents that can help our customers and through a problem faster. I think there's places for it. We're really focused on sellers and helping sellers make the most of their day and most of their opportunity. I think ultimately, AI is like an Iron Man suit for sellers. It's not the robot that takes over their jobs. It more helps them figure out how to be at their best. And those relationships are really key to convincing people to trust you and give you their money in return for a product or a service you sell.
I've got this image of an IVR being stuck in an IVR tree. And the only transference of belief there is, how do I get out of this IVR tree? I think you got a really good point there. People buy from people. Yeah, absolutely. So David, as a CEO who is a mechanical strategist, what suggestions do you have for businesses who are looking for that next phase of growth?
Yeah, I think that answer sits at the intersection of data and customer. So what I figured out, I've learned a lot about sales and the growth engines of companies over the years. And another thing I've come to believe is that sales is a tactical engine. It doesn't mean that sellers are tacticians necessarily, but companies need to be clear about what its product is, how that product is packaged and priced, how you go to market, what motions you run. And the sales team needs to be able to become masters of executing against those tactics, right? So I think that the best sellers, and I've been inside CRM systems first as a consultant and then as a CEO. The pattern I've seen, the most successful sellers are the ones who are organized and structured in how they approach their day and their time. So I believe the way you unlock growth is to bring data and rigor and process, listen to the customer relentlessly. They'll tell you. They may not tell you exactly in the words they use, but they'll tell you what they want from you and how to meet them where they need to be. So they'll tell you. You have to listen. You have to be really curious and listen. But customers will tell you. So I think if you're relentless about the data of the demand engine and you're relentless about listening to your customer, you'll solve your growth problems.
I like how you put data as a key component in there.
Yeah, and you're hitting on one of my passions, David, around voice of the customer. And I do want to get to understand more about how you, at an aggregate, would suggest businesses listen to customer sentiment. Because on one side, I'm hearing those relationship-based conversations where you're having a conversation with customer, you learn about them. I assume because you are so data-driven, you're not taking what one customer says and applying it to an entire customer base. You're looking at data across an aggregate of the customer base.
Yeah.
It would be helpful to learn from you what suggestions you have or how have you seen other businesses use customer sentiment to drive change within the organization?
Yeah. Great question, Lizzie. And remind me to come back to another thought on data too, Clint. But so I ran a company called Alchemer for 6 years. And what we did was feedback and survey. And we found a few things, Lizzie. First, it's got to be a systematic program. I think people go out and ask for customers to share their thoughts and opinions. in response to an event or as a reaction to something, rather than think about how they wired into everything they do, right? So, for example, NPS, people love Net Promoter Score. And often if you ask people how they use it, they say, well, we present it at our quarterly all hands meeting. I'm like, great. And then what? And they're like,
And then what?
We present it at the next quarterly all hands meeting.
And everybody's looking at it going, and then what?
Right, exactly. And I think there's a way to operationalize NPS. I don't think the score matters as much as if you're a promoter, a 9 or a 10, why don't you ask that customer to share their love for you with the rest of the world, right? Whether it be through G2 or Capterra or Gartner, or there's all sorts of ways people can share their opinion of the company. If that customer is a detractor, 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, they often have a complaint, an issue that's they're facing. You can turn that into a serviceable event. You can send it into your support team and have the team respond to that. If you're a passive, 6, 7, 8 in there, passives actually have the worst renewal rate. This is the thing that surprises people. There's an old expression, love me or hate me, just don't ignore me. I think in NPS, passives are the ones who leave you faster than the promoters or the detractors. So you can take those passives, send them to your customer success team and talk to them about engaging that customer more deeply. Like there's a way to operationalize what customers are telling you.
Oh, that's a fascinating insight there that kind of flips the whole idea of NPS a bit on its head. That the lower number is not the worst number, it's the middle number that's the worst number.
That's my experience. That when people have given up, when they don't care, apathy is a problem, right? It's in our personal relationships. If someone starts acting apathetic towards you, they don't care enough to have the argument, or they don't care enough to engage with you in a positive way. It's apathy is the problem. It's not love or hate, it's apathy. So I think in Net Promoter Score, it's the same kind of concept. Passives are the problem.
So you said a minute or so ago that you wanted to come back to the idea of data a bit more. Is that what's on your mind there?
Yeah, I think one other thing about demand chain and data, I think sometimes companies are reluctant to really inspect every aspect of the data that drives their demand chain. So that could be marketing qualified leads and how those turn into sales accepted leads and how they move through sales stages and whether reps are building close plans. It's all the normal stuff you see within the demand chain. I think what I love, and this is kind of the continuous growth concept as well, the always being better concept, is I love teams that want to find where the data is bad, right? Rather than think about vanity metrics, us using data to show that things are going well, the most important part of using data week in and week out to manage your demand chain is being curious and hungry for the areas that things aren't working and building a culture where people feel like they can engage in what's not working rather than feel defensive about those data points or focus on what is working, which honestly doesn't need the management attention like the other areas do. So
do you have any hot spots in there that you've seen across your 3 times as CEO, places where that data is often bad?
Well, I'll tell you one of the trickiest things, given we're a CRM company and we're talking about growth, the trickiest thing is driving outbound activity out of your sales team. It's really, really hard. I think sometimes people get a list together and they call the names on the list and they go, well, no one called me back. Anyone who knows anything about outbound cadences knows it takes 7, 8, 9, 10 touches. Sometimes people say 12 touches to get a customer to respond. So you've got to be relentless about inspecting the activity data that tells you whether your salespeople are driving the outbound cadences you expect them to drive and learning from what's working and what's not working. Again, one of the reasons I love software is it's so susceptible to A/B testing, right? Trying multiple things and leaning into what's working. And so unless you're curious, unless you embrace the challenging data, it's really hard to be better and better every week.
David, what is the reason that you think that sales leaders are not inspecting the data?
I think it's happening more and more, Lizzie. I think it used to be that people thought the successful salespeople are the one who went golfing with their clients. And I think that's a thing in the past. I had a CMO who said to me, 25 years ago, CMOs used to say, I know I'm wasting half my marketing budget. I just don't know which half, right? And what technology, especially CRM technologies, allow us to do today is really have a lot of information about the marketing function, the sales function. And I think the best go-to-market leaders today are really data-driven and know how to use those technologies to drive their business forward. So I think that's changed a lot in the last 20 years in terms of what we expect from go-to-market leadership.
Okay. So let's take this idea of learning from things and maybe apply it a little bit more personally to you. So sometimes I find that the best lessons learned are those that come from adversity or even failure. So thinking back across your leadership career, what are the top 2 or 3 mistakes you've made and how have you learned from them?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this a little earlier. I think the biggest thing I've learned is alignment, communication, prioritization, and the role as a CEO and how important that is to an organization. And that you can't do enough of any of that. You can't do enough to drive alignment. You can't do enough to communicate. You can't do enough to prioritize, make the really hard decisions about where a business is going to focus, and more importantly, where it's not going to focus. And I think from a leadership standpoint, you framed it as like mistakes you've made. I think it was sort of a mistake of omission. I didn't do enough of it in my first role as a CEO. And I've learned more and more that that's what I think companies need from its leaders is alignment, communication, prioritization, and making sure that there's real clarity around how we're going to go achieve our objectives together.
And the mistake being assuming that you've done enough because it's clear in your mind, but
Correct.
not necessarily everybody else in the company.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good one. I like that.
And also what you said earlier too, David, the way that you communicate may not be the way that people receive information. So when you're having to repeat information to an employee base, you have to repeat it through different avenues. It could be email, it could be in some form
You've got the visual learner, the auditory learner, the kinesthetic learner. People learn in different ways, right?
They totally do. And we all kind of assume that people learn like we learn. I get so much out of a brief conversation in email. I'm a slow reader. It takes me a while to get through emails, and it doesn't sink in the same way that an interactive dialogue helps things kind of cement in my mind. So that works for me.
I'm the same way.
But I know other people work very differently.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much truth in that.
Any other lessons learned that you want to call out in there?
Well, I've done a number of acquisitions throughout my career at every company I've been part of. And I think there's sort of I think one of the other lessons learned for me is people jump to the things that are controllable, right? So they want to go like create standard processes and standard data and drive integration. And everyone talks about the integration plans. I think the most important thing when you do go through M&A, the customer and the employee. And I think we move too fast into kind of processes and data and systems because it feels more controllable. It feels easier than being focused on how you help customers understand the value of an acquisition or how you help employees understand the vision of where you're now going to go together. And so I think I would slow down kind of the post-acquisition integration track. And look, I grew up as an Accenture guy running project plans. I jumped to that also, but I think that's been a big lesson learned for me that like you can slow some of that stuff down and really make sure the customer and the employees are taken care of.
I like that. That's a good one. I've seen that myself where the executive of the acquiring company says, I know how to run things my way, so I'm going to make everything my way as quickly as possible. And then you kind of blast over some of the things that you maybe purposely acquired. Maybe the company acquired is bringing you something that you weren't thinking about before.
Yeah. Buy it and break it is a really common story. And I think you've got to be careful to make sure that the reason you convince yourself that you ought to go buy something or sell something, that you stay focused on that and that you keep that as kind of a North Star in front of you.
I think a lot of senior leaders who would be known as, we'll call them functional area owners of a project of post-acquisition integration activities would probably appreciate your remarks on slowing things down because often we hear that it's done too quickly and the team may not have been able to fulfill all of their wishes and dreams to fully or properly integrate and then fulfill that vision that you mentioned, David, for the North Star for customers. Yeah.
Exactly, Lizzie.
It takes permission though, right? The permission from leadership.
It does take permission. And it's easy because like there's sort of a gut instinct to jump to harmonization and process and all that kind of stuff. And you have to resist the urge a little bit, right? Put a sticky up on your monitor that reminds you why you did it in the first place and make sure you stay focused on that.
So I've heard, let's see, the first one was over communicate and over communicate and over communicate. And as soon as you think you're done communicating, then that means you probably need to do some more. And then the second one I heard was go slower on acquisitions, right? Don't rush to integrate. If anything that you're going to rush towards is listening to the customers and listening to the employees. Those are two great ones.
Yeah. And that first one, Clint, I think there's alignment, communication, and prioritization, all those things, right? And alignment comes through struggling. I was saying to my 13-year-old the other day who was struggling with a new math concept, and he got super frustrated about it. And I said, it's in the frustration that we make step functions in our ability to understand and learn, right? So if it's not feeling frustrating, you're probably not pushing hard enough on what those hard decisions look like. And you don't really create alignment because people haven't struggled through it together. So
Boy, that sounds like a CEO dad if I've ever heard one.
yeah,
Son, you got a step function coming your way and you're going to love it.
yeah. I didn't say step function to Samuel, but yes, that's the idea.
Reminds me of the quote, there's beauty in the breakdown. You do need to overcome the challenges. And there's so much growth that comes from that. Well, we have our last question for you, David. I know the answer to this one, but let's see how you'll answer. Where can our listeners find you and learn more about you?
Yeah, well, I think the thing I use more than anything is LinkedIn. I think it's a phenomenal tool for more than just connection. There's so much great content out there, and it's so well curated against what's most important to you. That's probably the best place in the cyber world to reach me. You'll find me on the road. You'll find me with United Airlines a fair amount. You'll find me in the mountains in Colorado a fair amount. But in our vast dispersed world, I think LinkedIn's the best place.
I should have guessed United Airlines coming from Colorado.
There you go. Yeah.
Yes, they've got my loyalty, I must admit.
Very nice.
Well, I got to tell you, David, as one of the guys that started the company 21 years ago, to have you in the seat of CEO just excites me every time I talk to you. You've got such a fantastic view of how to run the company, an inspirational view of the CRM industry as a whole. We're lucky to have you as our leader, and I wish you nothing but huge success here, which I know as a mechanical strategist, you're busy planning out right now.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Clint. And I feel honored to kind of pick up the mantle from yours and others who have led the company over the last 20 years. I know we'll stay close as the evolution continues, and I want to hear your challenges and share in our successes. So thank you very much.
Outstanding. Appreciate having you here today.